Riverside.
All right, Puppy. The fate of the world is at stake. And you have to sing one song from beginning to end to save the world. What's your song? Save the world.
Now, I could pick like something in like an orchestra or something like that, but I could also pick the song Tequila. But if I'm forced to pick something with words in it, I think one of my favorite ones to sing when I'm just pissed drunk, goofy karaoke, is the song by the Doors. Not to touch the earth, not to see the sun. I don't know. It's just I memorized very few songs in my life, and for whatever reason, I memorized that one from the Doors. Yeah, but tequila was close. I thought about it. Yeah,
that would be an easy way to save the world. I mean, other than Happy Birthday, I mean,
oh yeah,
that would be save the world. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So let's go with Tequila. That'd be with the dance or no dance.
That's another catch.
I mean, I think Pee Wee Herman made it even a bigger point that the dance was important.
Well, I mean, he added something to the dance, and that was the shoes, the white shoes. Yeah, classic.
That suit, though, that was clean.
Tim Burton is a freaking legend. Oh, the director of the movie.
That was clean.
Tim Burton did, yeah.
All right. I guess if I had to sing a song to save the world,
yeah.
I mean, I'm not. Don't get me wrong. I can't sing. I don't have a voice.
It's not the point.
But if I had to save the world, it would my go-to karaoke. Anytime I've had a karaoke, there's a few songs. I go with some Frank Sinatra or whatever, but Radiohead, Creep. Because not really singing. It's just like kind of like you're. But
You said a song though.
Yeah, so it's pretty short and it's easy to remember. And so I would have to go with Radiohead, Creep to save the world.
Oh, Radiohead, Creep.
The
I'm
Creep.
a creep. Okay.
Yeah, but I'm a creep. I'm a weirdo. So that would be my go-to.
Yeah.
So
some depressing stuff. I mean, I like depressing music, but Hide the Knives, right? But
Yeah.
it's a great song.
I mean, there's some good depressing music out there.
Oh yeah, I love it. My wife gets annoyed. She's like, "Why are you listening to crap again?"
So what's a cool depressing artist or album?
I mean, the Cure is always amazing.
The Cure?
But I don't know why I love Modest Mouse. I don't know if you ever heard of them.
Yeah.
Modest Mouse, yeah, just some really low depressing crap.
The Smiths with that phone?
Yeah, I guess so.
Morrissey?
Yeah.
Right,
Okay, yeah. My wife gives me. I'm not. I don't call this stuff depressing music. My wife is the one that labels it this, and it's like constantly thrown out there. Why are you listening?
It's
to
kind of like
depressing crap?
80s. It's kind of like 80s, like Caifanes too. Caifanes like kind of like.
It's just this
It's
era
like
of the Smiths,
it's kinda like
Caifanes,
emo type.
But chicks dig it.
Classic. I mean,
Yeah.
when your wife over, probably, right? So, anyway, so we've been talking about Mount Rushmores. We went previously went about the Mount Rushmore history. Talked about the Mount Rushmore, our own personal Mount Rushmore.
We did one on the presidents, of course.
Presidents, and talked about the idea of like the best of the best, right? So who's on your Mount Rushmore for presidents, for athletes, for
and we talk about this a lot of what's going to be our next Mount Rushmore topic, and like, should we do this, should we do that? And we fumbled around with the idea of greatest artist or greatest genre, and we settled on today. We're going into
our Mount Rushmore of best albums.
Albums.
And we didn't set any criteria about
that is important.
About genre, about style. Like, we just said, who's on your Mount Rushmore? And I think that stressed me out even more. Because I'm like, God, I have so many like albums. And so since we didn't set any criteria for each other, like for the past week, I've just been like talking to people about, hey, what do you think about this? Or who's on your mind?
Yeah.
Because like I can't. And I knew I wasn't going to be happy at the end because I was like, because of who didn't make the Mount Rushmore for me, and the band, the albums, not bands.
I finally took my 5th one off today and made it 4 today, but it took me a while. Same thing.
Well, yesterday I had 8.
Yeah.
And it took till this, till today, pretty much in the morning, till I decided, okay, I have my 4, but I have like a sort of a little asterisk there.
Yeah.
Because I knew I wasn't going to be happy. And so I actually introduced this idea to my class this week where I gave them a little bit of a brief history of what Mount Rushmore is, like why the presidents were selected, the secret hallway, the secret room behind Lincoln, and like what the intentions behind the sculptor who did it. But because of World War II, they had to stop funding for it to pay for the war, and it never got finished. So it's actually not even completely finished.
That's right. They're going to finish the bodies.
So
that's right.
Washington is the only one with a torso, if you can see that. But they also talked about with the rest of them, they couldn't because it wasn't stable enough for the rest of them. So, and then I finish it off with, okay, so now that we got a little bit of history about Mount Rushmore, now it's your turn to come up with your own Mount Rushmore for albums.
Yeah, so I was making mine today, and one of your students was in one of my classes for something else, and then like, oh yeah, I'm doing one of those too. I was like, oh crap, she has Castillo. That's right.
Yeah, so they're working on it. I give them a week to think about it because I told them this is gonna be probably the hardest thing This is probably the hardest thing you're gonna do.
It's stressful, man.
Wow. And honestly, this is probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do is come up with my top 4 albums.
And our viewers might be disappointed in our selections, but you know what? I finally settled on my 4 that I don't really care.
Yeah,
I'm good with my 4. There's a 5th one that just like dangling there, and I'll talk about it. But still, I settled on 4.
So, I also realized something. I don't know if I should feel old or not, but a student asked me, "What's an album?" I'm like, "What? What do you mean? Like,
is that what it's turning into?"
And I'm like, an album, like when an artist releases a set list of new songs or a collection of songs, like a CD.
What do they call it?
And I said CD, and she's like, "Oh, those plastic discs."
Yeah.
And I was just like, "Oh man,
yeah.
Am I old now? Does that make me old?"
We had to sit there, and I remember the days on the computer. This was modern stuff back then. You have your certain songs selected on your computer. You want to add certain songs onto a CD, and you could like burn it onto a CD. And you, hey man, I got my mix. Or a
mixtape, right?
I got my mixtape, and man, that was a freaking thing, right?
I remember.
But the thing about I think the difference between the era now and the era back then, and I think a lot of this stuff kind of ended in the '90s. I think the '90s was like the last real decade of a great era of when they actually had like rock bands. It was 80s rap, 70s, and definitely 80s rap was coming up, and the 90s rap was like hit mainstream, and at the same time rock I think was kind of coming down, but still in the mainstream. And now you get in 2000s, you don't see this.
You have to distinguish rap too in a way where it's like 80s rap, then kind of morphed into we have gangster rap, right? And then you have like sort of this, I don't know if you want to call it fusion between R&B and rap, and like,
God, they don't even have R&B anymore. Like, we don't have our Jodeci's anymore. We don't have our...
Remember 112?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Casey and JoJo. Keith Sweat, man. Those.
Whenever I put it in, my wife's like, "Why are you all in love?" I'm like, man, I gotta listen.
Hey, we all got a little bit of a romantic side in us that we kind of hide a little bit, but
yeah, nowadays they just want all the rap. They just want to,
But yeah,
beat up the relationship. Back then, it was more like, man, you gotta romance it for you gotta.
Dude, I remember in Yuma they used to have these. I don't know if they had them here in the Imperial Valley, but these teen dances. Those of you, my friends, and I would always look forward to teen dances. And I didn't dance. I was always like kind of shy or whatever. But to go to the teen dances and wait for the slow songs, wait for the Keith Sweat. And
I remember the junior high dances was that
because you didn't have to dance, and so it was an easy song.
I was the same. I couldn't dance. Can I dance now? No, but with enough alcohol, I think I could dance. With enough alcohol, in my mind, I think I'm like Michael Jackson.
Some people might say Santana got moves, but it depends on the genre.
Yeah, they're probably high too. Yeah.
So,
okay.
But anyway, so I introduced this idea of Mount Rushmore, your music albums. You got a week to work on it. We're gonna do like a little like group presentation type. We're gonna share it. Let's just talk about music, right?
Yeah.
But the student said, "What's an album?" And I'm like, man, CDs, and then the fact that she was like, oh, that plastic thing, and I'm thinking, I was just like, man, I think this is a moment where I start thinking, I was like, I'm getting old. It's like,
And it is even beyond the material, whether it's CD or tape. It's the fact that when artists release stuff, they release complete albums, complete boxes of their artwork, right? Mm-hmm. And it was a thing to sit there and I'm going to go into a couple albums I'll talk about today, and like they even had nicknames for like that with tapes, A side and the B side, or even listening to the stuff on record, or it's just a totally different era now to where it's just like kind of one song drops, one song drops here, one song drops there. Rarely is it like a complete album. You hardly see that anymore.
Especially with like, you know, now like music, the way it's consumed is so different. It's like
SoundCloud, and
you have
Spotify, and the Apple Music, and
YouTube, and that really changed the whole.
Artists are only releasing on this medium, and
because back in the day, you used to be able to wait on MTV. Like, remember MTV used to play music? Yeah, believe it or not, MTV used to play music. Anybody who's like under the age of 25, probably if you're listening, they used to play music on MTV. It's called music television. Now it's like, I don't even know what it is, but whole different thing now.
Before YouTube, like that's all we had. So that's why.
So you used to wait for like music to be dropped, a single release that would go onto an album, and they would, you know, put it on MTV.
They tell the artist, right, let's make a video of this song, of this album that you're dropping, and this will help the album blow up.
Yeah, so it's a promotional piece as well.
Yeah,
but it's totally different. So in the process of coming up with our Mount Rushmore, like, and this is something I would tell my class, when you're trying to come up with your Mount Rushmore, list as many of what initially comes to mind, like because they're all your favorites in a different way, but that way it makes it easier to start eliminating. And that's kind of what I have here. And if you kind of look at this board behind us, we have the ones that didn't make our Mount Rushmore, but there are honorable mentions, and I guess that's what we can start off with today.
What was your criteria though? Because we looked up Rolling Stone's top whatever, and I saw some albums. Are you serious? But not our audience, and let alone our British audience, right? But not all of our audience is going to agree with our picks. But that's not the point. Like, there's no wrong answer here. These are your top ever.
Some might say there is a wrong answer, but.
Yeah, like if you
really, there's no.
I'm looking at one of your picks. I'm like, oh my god, they listen. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, well,
like this.
That's what I was gonna get into. Is like, for me, it was more about like what. Part of it was like part nostalgia, and it was a mix between like what I grew up with, listening to the most, and like I sort of gravitated to. And initially, I thought Spanish rock, hip hop, rap. Norteño, mariachi. I love mariachi, so rancheras. So it was a combination. So it kind of reflects that, but also like kind of like electronic. I don't know if you want to. I don't even know what exact the genre, but like Daft Punk. I remember hearing Daft Punk from. I was like, oh man. And then I remember going through like this phase of like listening to Bad Boy Bill, Richard Humpty Vision, DJ Irene, like artists who were like very popular in the rave scene, even though like I wasn't a raver.
Late 90s, early 2000s.
Right? So like in the 90s is like, so these, I was like, oh, so like I'm literally, when the people ask me what's your favorite meal, I was like, I am all over the place. And so I try to reflect that in my picks, is like kind of like, because we didn't set criteria about artists or genre, right? So mine was like, I want to try to pick albums that sort of reflect a variety, or like sort of the spectrum of music that I enjoy. And so even though I couldn't include all the genres, these are some of the ones that for me, these were like, it was the hardest thing I had to do in a long time.
Yeah. So, but you say certain words, like you hear a song and you could picture where you were when you heard this song. Like we'll get into one of the albums that I remember I was doing a quinceañera. Yeah. And like I hear a song from there and it'll take me right back to where I was, like in quinceañera practice. But it's more so like nostalgia kind of impact on your life. There's one of them that influenced me to be a teacher. History teacher, right? So it's kind of along the same realm.
So, and kind of with that too, a little bit, kind of like tying to like history and stuff like that. But I don't know, what was your thought process in picking yours?
It was pretty much on that. Like, what has influenced me the most? What nostalgia plays a factor, and kind of along those two lines. You know what I mean? And a lot sometimes it's hard. You look at an artist and like, man, there's like these 3 or 4 or maybe 1 or 2 albums. You're like, man, which one do I pick? And it, like that's what makes it tough. Like, man, how do you pick one of their golden albums over all these other albums? And that, you know, decisions like that were hard.
And I'm glad you pointed that out, because one of the or a couple albums that didn't make my Mount Rushmore were just a victim of circumstance, that I couldn't choose one. So I said, you know what? Because I can't choose the one from this group, you're not going on there. And I'll kind of point that out at the end. But it was a... Those who know me, my friends who are really kind of know me, they're going to be kind of surprised by the ones that didn't make my Mount Rushmore. But it was hard. So I guess we can go into our honorable mentions. Who are your honorable mentions? Who do you have up here?
So, honorable mentions. Again, going off. I remember. Well, last year, I was watching an Anthony Bourdain episode, and I saw something on what's his name? God damn it! Okay, on David Bowie. He was talking about it when he went to Munich. Yeah. Okay. And I got and I don't know why I got really into that. And it was during COVID. And I would go for long walks with my daughter and put it on my phone. And I would be just constantly listening to this. And it was Ziggy, the rise and fall of Ziggy Stardust. As far as like a complete album, and some of the songs like I could get really into, that'd be one. Up here, the 444, that's one of Jay-Z's last albums. And there's certain things where he talks about in there like encouraging, like talk about drug dealers, what you do with your money. And like, man, we shouldn't be buying flashy cars or flashy jewels. We could actually invest in certain assets. And like, he actually talks about that in his album. So that one blew me away. J. Cole in similar fashion. And of course, you have the Notorious B.I.G. Man, the album dropped. It's this thing I could sit there and just listen to top to bottom.
Just nod your head.
Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. Other people might have other picks for what their album is. But man, and that was a famous one where supposedly you started at a certain point with Wizard of Oz. Like when the lyre roars and the second thing and you play it, supposedly the album goes along with a movie or something like that. I don't know. I never got that. I had to be a Kanye West. I was between The Life of Pablo but I put College Dropout just because everything that went into actually finally getting recognized in that complete album. Of course, Doggy Style. Michael Jackson's Thriller. Man, it was hard to keep this one out of the Mount Rushmore, but yeah, this one was super hard. This is Sublime, even though I was really into 40 Ounces for Freedom. The Sublime album, the last one he made before he passed away, was just legendary. And of course, there's a million Bob Marley ones to contribute along the way. That's one of my biggest influences, especially in high school. I got really into it. But again, these are the ones that didn't make the list for me. But were super close. I debated for a while.
So the Bob Marley one, like, that was hard because I have one too. But like,
I picked the original one, Catch a Fire.
Catch a Fire.
Yeah.
And it was hard for me to pick the Bob Marley one because, you know, like, I don't know, like reggae in itself, like, I don't know. I can get lost just listening to reggae all day, but
so many different types.
Yeah, there is, and that's partly what's kind of like. So I like so one of I'll get into mine. One of mine is like Fabulosos Cadillacs, which is this one, and there's a lot of good ones. I like El León because it's kind of like it's ska, but it's also rock and it's also funk and it's also kind of jazz. Yeah. But there's definitely like elements of reggae in ska. That's kind of like why I like you know, Panteón Rococó, Inspector. It's
certain musicians.
Ska and reggae. It's similar. Ska's faster, you know, but the reggae sort of beats go.
I mean, that's what's cool. That's what's cool about some of these musicians. That they hear stuff and they hear sounds different the way I hear sounds. And you're talking about them just mixing like different genres into their own, creating their own artwork, and that's musician.
I mean, one of my favorites is Fabulosos Cadillacs, El León. I have Exodus, Bob Marley. I have Soda Stereo. This one was tough to keep out on my top 4, but it's the last live concert they did in Buenos Aires, Argentina.
You picked the live one, okay.
Yeah, and I'm a sucker for live, and I mean, if we just went unplugged, man, like, I don't know. But so I went with that live album. I have Jay-Z, Linkin Park. That album is they do just a mashup of their own. So they have like a Jay-Z beat from one of his songs and Linkin Park's lyrics on top, and then they take turns, and then it's like Linkin Park's track with Jay-Z's lyrics on, and it goes. They go back and forth, and I love that album, and some of these like I just play it like when go to the gym and just which leads me to System of a Down. 2001 they released Toxicity. That one I was like, I didn't realize how much I enjoyed that album because it's like a bunch of songs, but they're short. But it's a collection of short, high energy songs, but also they're very entertaining, and it's got also obviously an element of like sort of activism.
They're into politics, man.
Yeah, it does. So that one, Daft Punk. I have two Daft Punk like in my honorable mentions. Discovery in 2001. I remember watching the videos, and like it's kind of like they have that sort of that anime. I guess you can consider anime, but the videos I would put with it, the Alive album, which they performed, I think it was in France, Paris, France. It's a live album. I don't know. I just always like live albums. Café Tacuba, which I can't wait to see in December. I've never seen them perform, but in December at Dodger Stadium, Bésame Mucho Festival. I didn't realize how lucky I was to get tickets, but I got tickets for this festival, and they're going to be one of the headliners there as well, which kind of also reminds me of like yesterday, one of my favorite bands, Los Enanitos Verdes, the lead singer passed away, Marciano Cantero, and I was like, I was like, no, like people are like on social media were like, oh, the Queen this, the Queen that passed away, Queen Elizabeth, and then I saw the lead singer of Enanitos Verdes passed away, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Right away, I started texting my cousin, and I'm like, and he actually posted something online, and it's like,
it's definitely bigger than Queen Elizabeth.
Oh my God! I'm like, no way! And I was like, I just got all of a sudden a bunch of memories came up because of Enanitos Verdes, and again, music has that power to kind of spark memories. But rest in peace, Marciano Cantero, lead singer of Enanitos Verdes. He was supposed to perform at this festival in December. And I actually had a chance to see them a couple times, but the last time I saw them perform was in Mexicali. They performed with another famous Spanish rock band, Hombres G, and they did that similar mashup where they would take turns on stage and play each other's songs. They would play their songs, and they would play the other band songs, and then the other one would come to stage, and like they would take turns, and it was one of the funnest concerts I've seen in a long time. But he just passed away yesterday, and so I was like, so I was like the mashup. This kind of reminded me of that. Snoop Dogg, Doggy Style in '93. I mean, that almost made my list. Ramon Ayala. I'm gonna go see him in concert next week. He's also at that festival, Bésame Mucho Festival in December. I've never seen him live, but these are definitely honorable mentions. Can't go without mentioning Tupac, All Eyes on Me, Marshall Mathers LP, Eminem. They came out. I was like, they just, man, it was hard not to keep these on my Mount Rushmore, but you could see like we have a pretty wide array of genres. I have norteño, I have electronic, I have like hard metal, Spanish rock, reggae, hip hop, gangster rap. If I had more time, I would have put on there like Mozart's greatest hits or something like that, because I don't know. I'm really all over the place with that, but I do have to. And I guess I'll wait till the end to mention who I left out, because I haven't what album I left out, but we'll go with that. So I guess we can go into our Mount Rushmores. You go, I go.
Okay.
You go.
Okay. So. There's no like particular order. I wasn't settled on a certain number one. Again, I've had a lot of different like influences of my childhood, who I am, whatever.
It's hard to rank number one.
So Led Zeppelin, I'd always heard. My uncles pretty much raised me on this stuff, but it wasn't until I was a freshman in college I got a chance to go with. I got tickets to Page Plant, and this is without John Bonham or whatever the drummer, but got to see Page Plant, and I was excited to go. They're legends. I just didn't know their music as well. I didn't realize how much music I didn't know, but I got to go with my Uncle Mike and my cousin Eli, who is now has his own band, Eli Santana. So, but there's a lot of different Led Zeppelin albums I went to, but I went with the original Led Zeppelin 1. I went with Led Zeppelin 1 as my first pick. I could just sit there and I put the stuff on, and what are they talking about? It doesn't matter. But listen, and just even the time I got to see him in concert, Jimmy Page, I remember playing like the double guitar, and then all of a sudden he got out like what do you get the violin piece. He got the guitar started getting down like that, and sometimes Jimmy Page would just stop singing, kind of take a knee in front of the stage, and be sitting there drinking the Dos Equis, and just still to this day watching Jimmy Page play. I mean, they're absolutely amazing. The energy, some of the stuff their riffs they bring. Sure, they ripped off a lot of concepts from everywhere, but I think a lot of musicians will argue that that kind of happens all over the place. Kind of like teaching. Very rarely are my ideas original. They come from some influence. I take an influence and I create something else with it. So
there's certain albums that like
they've been sued a few times
are iconic.
Yeah,
and I think this is one of those like iconic albums. Just like people recognize the Zeppelin, right? So definitely, we didn't pick them based on the album covers, but I think definitely when you think of like great albums, oftentimes it's easy to identify by.
I would have normally picked the Mothership because it's kind of more compilation, but I don't want to pick any compilation albums like Bob Marley Legend. That's a compilation album. True the Mothership, same, which is amazing. But anyway, go for it. What you got?
I guess I'll go with. I kind of mentioned a little bit, but Rage Against the Machine's first album. Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah, we're discussing this. Which one do you pick? That one or the other? What's the other?
So that's kind of why I kind of struggled with this. Like, do I go with the first one, or do I go with Battle of Los Angeles?
Like, there isn't necessarily a wrong answer, but it's hard saying this one and not this one, and that's the trouble.
Talk about the album cover. What comes to mind?
So, what, like the real story behind it?
Yeah.
Okay,
what comes to mind?
The guy that we supported in South Vietnam, and Kennedy was president at the time. Mm-hmm. He was more of a president of the free market, and the guy in the north, Ho Chi Minh, he was a communist. So we're going to support anybody who's not communist is willing to fight against communists. So we supported the guy that the name's not coming to mind, but he was very Catholic in a Vietnamese country, and so there was these Buddhists shown right here. In protest, and I think it wasn't just one guy, it was a number of them across the country. They went on the street and set themselves on fire and did not scream. They stood there and just took it the whole time. Like they killed themselves like that because they were the Buddhists were being persecuted and rights were being stripped by the president who was actually Catholic at the time. Yeah. Why was he Catholic? Why is there such a big Catholic influence in Vietnam? Because they were a colony of the French before. So that's why they burned themselves, super symbolic, and guess what? It worked. It got us to move away from that dictator, and eventually Kennedy had him offed. Kennedy had him assassinated. That president,
basically. So, and that kind of speaks to the band themselves. Who, one of the reasons when I first heard them, I more for like the entertainment purpose. Like,
it's definitely a different flavor than most metals. Yeah, not really this, not really
because
that.
It's kind of like a mix of metal, rap, hip hop. It's a little bit of everything, right? Like,
but the lead singer, didn't he? I think he went to Yale.
I'm not sure. He's from California. Zach De La Rocha, right?
He's very well educated.
Oh yeah,
really bright dude.
My brother got to meet him.
Really?
Back in 2000.
I would have been in
5. They at a protest, I think in Denver, Colorado. But just the band themselves, their ability to have a great sound, and have the activist element to it, like they're political activists.
It's a badass, man.
Well, thinking of some of their songs, like Bomb Track, Killing in the Name of, Wake Up. But I think I was reading an article. Let's see if I can find it, where it talked about sort of how, here it is, the meaning behind Killing in the Name, and it ties in American history, especially after the LA riots, '92. Rodney King beating, and like LA was on fire, right? Like basically on fire. And so that inspired a lot of their lyrics, a lot of the stories that goes with their songs and stuff like that. And when I got to college, when I was at Arizona State, you know, a lot of what they were talking about started really to make more sense to me. You know, I mature a little bit more, learn more about history, and I'm like, oh, I now understand sort of what they're talking about. And I don't know, it just kind of, you know, it kind of hit a chord with me. I'm like, oh, I was like, okay, I get it, and I
it shows you how much more badass they are.
It wasn't just an album to work out to anymore. Yeah. Like, oh, you know, it gets me more excited. But it had a meaning now, and I understood it. So I always think of this album for that. And it was hard to not choose the other ones, but I went with this one. This is the first one. Yeah. Rage Against the Machine. So I'm gonna put this on my.
So the reason why you mentioned like the politics and everything in it, and this was something I had grown up, is Ice Cube, Death Certificate. So you talked about kind of the politics of it is 1991, right? The politics of Rage Against the Machine. Well, Ice Cube was also very political at the time. And a lot of the stories he talk about, a lot of the politics talk about Jesse Jackson, Operation Push. He talked about the King James, the guy who translated the original Bible, and the kind of weird crap that he was into. But a lot of the history, and again, like you said, I started listening to stuff, learning some of the history from him. Then you go to college and have stuff, these affirmations, like reaffirmation. Oh wow, okay, this is how, and you learn the details of these stories. But man, you know, that Ice Cube Death Certificate one it's actually an influence on why I picked history as a major. He was just that badass. He wasn't like, that album wasn't as popular as far as album sales overall compared to some of these other ones on the list. But man, it just, as far as how impactful Ice Cube was to me, along the same lines as Rage Against the Machine, just didn't give a shit. They were going to say stuff and they didn't care.
That's where No Vaseline, right?
Yeah, that one when I first got on the album, that wasn't. I think that song became more popular when the movie came out. But man, just some of the other things, talking about how they started moving crack out of LA and into St. Louis, and one of the songs about how the man's best friend when you're in the hood, it is not a dog, because a dog's not going to get you out of trouble in the hood. What will get you out of trouble in the hood is a gun. So it's like bird in the hand. And they played that riff in not Menace Society. What was that first movie he was in?
Was it Menace Society?
No, the first movie he was in, John Singleton. The movie is not coming to me, but they featured like Bird in the Hand, and one of the assassins for Crenshaw Mafia or something like that. I don't know, but yeah, to me, it's just a super influential album on me. Yeah. Are there better picks for other people? Oh, absolutely. But for me, influential on me, yeah, Ice Cube. This album, big deal.
So, kind of related to Ice Cube, and I guess in a little bit in the history department, my next one, and I kind of wanted to wait to share this after you shared your next one, because it kind of builds off that. So I don't know if you want to go into your next one.
I will go up. You want to just jump into this one?
Share your next one.
Okay, so that's funny.
I almost chose that one.
We again, this is an issue where we picked the same artist, and he'll talk about his, but we're talking about Dr. Dre. Is there better rappers in the world? Absolutely. Yeah. But what is the guy? He's an artist. Want to put it in the middle?
Yeah, put it in the middle.
Okay. Oh yeah, so put them next to each other. He is an artist, and he could hear a bunch of different sounds in a lot of different ways. He actually got me into some of the other like old school music too. Just some of the stuff that I knew he was listening to, some of the sounds that I hear from his albums. But that original, The Chronic, and the fact that they were still tied to Jerry, what's the guy's name? Jerry Heller? The guy who was a manager for NWA. Yeah. And he was able to get away from it and still do a deal. And he produced this whole record on his own in his own house.
Well, he was a DJ.
But he would have parties. And they talk about this in a special. And then he created this whole album on his own, in his own house, in his own studio, his own house. And he didn't have that very much money back then, but he had enough to kind of get by and make this album. And then Jimmy Iovine heard it for the first time.
Jimmy Iovine.
Jimmy Iovine. Who is Jimmy Iovine? He made U2. And they used to be a punk band. Then they became U2 after they met Jimmy Iovine. Stevie Nicks, Tom Petty. And of course he signed Dr. Dre in this album. But just some of the compilation of different artists that he brought in there was absolutely insane. Well, definitely known as one of the greatest albums ever, but I definitely have to go there. But you picked a different Dr. Dre.
Yeah, well, in this one, he has Snoop, he has Daz Dillinger.
I mean, this one brought Snoop on the scene pretty much.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, pretty much.
See, young
Dog Pound,
pre-21-year-old Snoop Dogg,
yeah,
apart.
So
none but G.
And I thought like I want to, because I remember when my brother was in high school, I'm gonna sound old here, but you'll know what I'm talking about. You remember when you used to be able to order CDs through Columbia Warehouse?
Yes.
And you would send in the stamps.
1 penny.
Well, initially, you get like 10 CDs for 1 penny, but then you had to agree on a contract to get an album or a CD a month. Well, my brother had the Columbia. He did that, and so he would get a bunch of CDs, and I think that's kind of when I started really to get into listening to music, because he had like the Eagles, Hotel California.
Yeah, it got me into music that was outside of the immediate circle.
I remember listening to
that's
Nate
the first time I
Dogg.
ever bought. This is the first time I ever bought Nate Dogg, and I remember this is the first time I ever heard a Grateful Dead album, and I got into that same concept. Got me into James Brown and stuff like that. Yeah,
and so he sometimes would buy like CDs for my dad, and so there was a couple like.
But you had to keep on ordering.
But yeah,
so crap. What am I going to order this month? You know what? I'm not really familiar with this over
and
here.
This is like at the beginning stages of CDs, like when CDs were like barely becoming popular.
Yeah.
And I remember one time he ordered Dr. Dre's The Chronic. And I'm like, listening to him, like, oh, what is this? Like,
this might have been the first CD that I ever listened to, on an actual compact disc.
Yeah.
On an actual CD. Because I was in 7th grade and somebody, hey man, check this out. He had his Walkman with the CD inside. He opened it up, and the CD was just a big weed leaf. And I remember in 7th grade, 13 years old, thinking, oh, damn, this is crazy. Like, hey, let me hear it, like that. I remember 7th grade at PE, it was some guy, the PE teacher was Mr. Driscoll at Wilson Junior High. And God, I forget the guy. But he was like the teacher's aide, 8th grader. But just thinking about these songs, and this is the album that like at quinceañera practice for one of my neighbors across the street, Karina. We'd be practicing, and the practice would be over, and then they'd always throw on like nothing but a G, like every night.
Yeah,
every freaking night, all these cholas dancing, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. But anyway,
did they ever call you?
Who?
These nuts. Remember that song? Oh man.
Yeah.
I remember. Oh,
people didn't even know where that comes from.
We're like,
people didn't even know
like looking back at it, I'm like, it's kind of like, and I kind of like think back to some of the obviously the songs on the list, and it's just like, and I kind of like are wary sometimes of sharing with my students. They're like, oh, you listen to that? That was the lyrics on there, the content. I was like, yeah, but I was 12 when I heard this or whatever. But that song when it came, that track was. We used to try to pull that prank on each other. Hey, did they ever get a hold of you? Who?
Was another memorable one in this one?
So I didn't go with the first one.
Green. And that's in this one right here.
Call me anymore. But so I went with 2001, and now originally, here it is, and I didn't know this until like I started reading into the album, a little bit of the history. I always thought it was the album itself, because of obviously the cover was Chronic 2001, but the official title is 2001, and I didn't know this, but a lot of it has to do with the fact that Death Row, had Dr. Dre was a part of Death Row Records, Suge Knight, CEO.
Some of the names they had from Jerry Falwell to Suge Knight.
They had the rights to the Chronic album. And so when they found out that he was going to release a new album with a similar name, Suge Knight, he put out like a compilation album, and he called it Chronic 2000.
Yeah. And
so somebody let him know, and so I kind of read. I was trying to see what exactly it was. he didn't use the same title because of the legal side of things, and so instead he just went straight up to 2001. And on here, I mean, I remember listening to this, and I'll go ahead and put it up now. I was in high school. When this first came out. This is I think it was in the fall of '99. I know, fall of 99. I was a junior in high school, but I remember like everywhere we would go, it was on. Like driving down 4th Avenue, people down the street were listening to this album. We go to parties, go to kickback, and people were listening to the song because, yeah, the first one, 2000, it's a classic, but this one just felt like it had like just bangers, like banger after banger after banger, just hits. And like there's still some iconic songs that go Still DRE, Explosive, What's the Difference, Forgot About Dre, The Next Episode. Like when you hear a certain and certain tracks like clink 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 clink,
cultural,
yeah. So
classics.
When you hear that piano sound, it's like, oh, that's a Dre song. But the I guess the genius behind Dre is that he is able to sort of put together a mashup of like old school funk songs and kind of like add a modern twist to it, because a lot of these songs are sort of it doesn't take tracks specifically, but there's like portions of tracks previously or references to others that is put together. And I just remember like in high school, this was the album. Like everybody was playing it. Every time we went to a party, it was on. Like at least one or two tracks was on, and people would sing along to it. So it was like fun. It was like an exciting album to listen to.
And that's about the time that Eminem broke. It really made it big.
Yeah,
also
around the same time.
And he's on this album.
Well, the other thing that makes this great is that Dre features like so many different artists. You have Exhibit, you have Snoop again, Devin the Dude, Corrupt, Hitman, who's like on so many different tracks. Mary J. Blige at the end on the song "The Message," which I believe he wrote it for his brother. Dr. Dre's brother passed away when he was younger. But there's just so many like iconic tracks on this now that it's just like, for me, it was like this one, because I can still remember how much we would listen to it, and there's just part of my own criteria was not just like quality, but how many quality songs. So kind of like quantity, how many quality songs are on the album. And so each of these that I chose have like, at least at a very minimum, I had to highlight at least half of them as quality songs. Yeah. At least. And
you created a new criteria. Yeah.
For me, it was like
this. I see the songs that are highlighted.
So I highlighted a bunch of songs. There's like 22 tracks on there. Not all of them are songs, because some of them are little skits or whatever. Yeah. But also what I learned about is that Dre put this together kind of like, not so much as a, I don't know how to put it, like a song album, but it was like kind of like a production, like a kind of like a show. Yeah. He was like, it was like he was telling like this kind of like a story throughout. Yeah. With like pauses in between, but it just has so many quality songs. Like for
that's how I felt
hip-hop.
Like Doggy Style had the feel creating a certain thing. And that's how I felt about this one. I know side A and side B because of the tape. The first side was the life side, and the second side was the death side. So it was a whole theme with the original Chronic, with the Chronic album that you're talking about now right here. But yeah, that's kind of the old school, the way you release an album. And a bunch of songs.
And that's why I almost went with Snoop's, because of how many quality tracks are on there. Yeah. But I remember in high school, I was a lot younger. I was, I don't know, maybe like in 5th or 6th grade when Snoop put out his first. No, actually, I was younger than that.
Where did you graduate?
2001. But he released this in '93. I was like in 4th or 5th grade when I heard it. But this one was in high school. I was a junior. That's really when I really started going out more and just kind of like like party a little bit more in high school, and so I remember this album so much, so I had to put it on my Mount Rushmore.
We're gonna drop another one.
Yeah. So now this next one, which is totally different, but it kind of goes with the nostalgia side, but also because mariachi is one of my favorite genres personally.
You guys are a legend.
Rest in peace. Yeah, this past year we've lost a couple greats, and Vicente Fernandez is one of those.
You guys are
Passed
legend.
away in December last year, but one of the best concerts I've ever gone to in my life.
Certain people don't die. I think Anthony Bourdain, in that sense, but Vicente Fernandez.
So
There's so much of the material they left behind. It's
Yeah.
like they died, but are they really ever dead?
no,
Yeah.
they live on.
They left so much material
Their
behind.
legacy continues through their music and their lyrics. But in this album, this is the last live performance. So this is a live album.
Yeah.
Un Azteca en el Azteca. So he performed at in el Estadio Azteca in Mexico. This is a massive stadium.
Yeah.
He's performed there before, but this was his last live performance because then he had started getting health issues or whatever. And just this past year he passed away. But for me, like, it just reminds me so much of my upbringing, my childhood. Anytime we would get together at my grandpa's house in San Luis, we would always there was always like rancheras, you know, Vicente Fernandez, Jose Alfredo Jimenez, Pedro Infante, Javier Solis. And now as we got older, every time we had a gathering, boom, play the music, Vicente Fernandez. And we, you know, and with my Lopez, in the Lopez side of my family, especially, I'm Lopez, we drink tequila. And my grandpa kind of taught us how to, like, respect it. But in the backdrop, what's playing? Vicente Fernandez, Jose Alfredo Jimenez, whatnot.
But the Centenario you brought over to my mom's, and you said your grandfather was really into.
Oh, yeah.
I found it at Bevmo.
Yeah. So
And I saw it at a more general store too. Like, oh shit.
and it's a good tequila, and it's fairly cheap, but that's what we.
The more alcohol I drink, the more I realize that it's not so much about price. Just if it hits you right, it hits you right.
Yeah.
Kind of like
taste.
Like we could do a Mount Rushmore on tequilas.
Oh, we
for all and different picks for different reasons.
And we should.
Okay, I'm in.
But
Just can't do
so
it. We have to pick a different venue.
True that.
Tore the hell up.
True that.
And it might take a few months to sit there and accumulate different $30 to $40 bottles of tequila.
And it felt like, I don't know if you're the same, but the more tequila we had, the better we would sing. And we'd start singing these songs and
Yeah.
Hermoso Cariño.
That's how I feel about
Canta
dancing.
Nos, and,
just makes sense.
but this, and
My heart pours.
so with Vicente Fernandez, I had the chance to see him several times, but the
Yeah.
best concert I ever saw was in Hermosillo, Sonora,
Mm-hmm.
and in un palenque. How do you say palenque in English?
I don't know.
Where the roosters, cockfights, that arena,
Yeah.
whatever you call it, palenque. He started singing at midnight, and I saw him twice. 1 year after now, in 2004, and in 2005, I saw him again. I think it was 2005, somewhere around there. And both times he started at midnight, and he sang nonstop till 3 in the morning. It was epic.
Yeah.
Because at the time, I mean, he's in his 80s, early 80s or whatever, late 70s, early 80s, and he had, talk about power, like he had a power voice, and he would sing and then he would drop his microphone. Like if anybody knows Vicente Fernandez, what I'm talking about, he dropped his microphone, you could still hear him. Man, it was the most memorable concert I've ever been to.
Yeah.
And I had to put him on here because Chente, he's the GOAT.
Solid pick.
He's the GOAT.
So for the next one, and there's a number of these different albums out here, and a lot of people would argue the greatest band of all time. And yeah, I know it's very mainstream, very popular at a certain time,
Oh.
but the more I got into it, I mean, the Beatles they're legit, man. And it was hard to pick any certain one album. And I know you and I were talking about that album, like which album you picked, and mine was Abbey Road. And a big reason why I chose this one,
Iconic album.
it was their last album, And so when I turned 16, my mom bought me 4 albums. It was Peter Frampton Comes Alive, Dark Side of the Moon, Pink Floyd, Santana Abraxas, and Abbey Road. But this one, I don't know why, just Long Drive or whatever. It has certain iconic sounds or whatever. But it just, I thought of. I mean, there's Beatle albums.
Was this their last album? I can't remember the year.
That one's 69.
Okay, because they recorded. I think this was the last album they recorded together.
Yeah.
Because then they recorded another album. Maybe it's Let It Be. I can't remember if maybe it's this one.
Let It Be, I think 66, 67.
Okay.
But I could be wrong.
In 70. But they didn't record it together. They were already kind of broken up.
Okay.
And they went in the studio, but this is their last one, like, together.
Uh-huh.
Together, definitely. But you talk about albums that are iconic, you look at it and it's kind of taken on its own sort of persona, but
people that visit London, they want to go and
it's
find
a
Abbey Road
landmark.
and do the walk.
It's a landmark,
absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
So for those of you who are British listeners, are 1% now. I think we're down at maybe 0.5%. Send us a picture of you guys walking Abbey Road. But to me, this was definitely one in the mix. It was kind of hard. For me, the Beatles it was hard to pick one, like just one.
Yeah.
And this was in the mix because some of my favorite songs are on here. I think track 8, Because I love that song. Because Come Together.
I was about to say because of what, and I looked up. Oh, that's the song.
I Want You. I want you. Da da da. I want you so bad. Da, da, da. I'm not gonna sing, but that's
he has something about the
so
Queen.
Heavy.
The last one, Her Majesty.
Oh yeah.
I want to tell her that I love her a lot, but I got a belly full of wine. Yeah. Anyways,
Octopus's Garden, Oh Darling. So I like that sort of mix it has in there because it kind of has some of that jazzy rock.
Yeah.
Like Come Together. Dun,
Yeah.
dun, dun, that, with
usually,
that bass.
You get to the last albums of certain artists like that. Like I know, even with the Doors, there's a lot of great albums, but their last one they did, L.A. Woman, all the influences all had kind of putting together at the end.
Yeah.
And it's something about that. I feel that about the Doors, L.A. Woman, which it should be an honorable mention. But you know, whatever. But Abbey Road, with their last album put together, as far as everything they put together, and everything the Beatles did after was. I mean, George Harrison, like, do I know George Harrison? And you sit there, you go on Spotify, you put on George Harrison's song, oh, I do know this song.
Yeah.
You get into John Lennon, forget about it. And Paul McCartney was making music until...
Yeah. And Ringo Starr, too, but he's kind of like a sort of under the radar on the Beatles.
He was the 4th Beatle.
Yeah. He was the best-looking Beatle, they say. Anyways. But one of the things I liked about this album is how they sort of, I don't know if they did this on purpose or it took off after. It's like that whole Paul McCartney is dead.
With the shoes, yeah,
he
that's
was
right.
not wearing shoes, and
he wasn't wearing
he had
shoes.
a cigarette in his hand.
Yeah.
So there's this whole that Paul McCartney's dead.
Yeah.
And one of their tracks supposedly like if you wind it backwards, it says Paul McCartney is dead.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like they're also because John Lennon's. He was one of the things I liked about is he had like this dark humor and he was very sarcastic.
Yeah.
Which you got a really good sense of that in there. I don't know if I think I told you about this. I don't know if you watched it. The documentary just came out like not too long ago of the Beatles. It's called Get Back.
Yeah.
And it's on Disney Plus. But on there, it's them recording their last album together. Actually, it's not Abbey Road. It's probably Let It Be. Maybe it's Let It Be. No, it's Get Back. They're playing that when they do the
their performance on top of
the rooftop performance.
Yeah, that was their last.
That album that they put together, they documented it and they actually just put together this documentary. Yeah. But that was their intention, that we're going to record this documentary to show the progress and the process they go through in recording an album.
Yeah,
the lyrics and just kind of playing around music. But during that process in that album, Harrison quits. George Harrison quits, and you can see when he quits, and you can hear the conversations they're having. It's super cool. But like you really get a feel for their personalities and how.
I always thought it was Yoko the reason why they.
I mean, I think a lot of people blame Yoko Ono because.
But it's not fair,
and it was an easy
because John Lennon just doesn't care.
But it changed the dynamic in a sense. But I don't know. I'm not gonna go and say Yoko Ono split up the Beatles, but you could tell like everywhere he went, she was like right here. Like,
By the way,
sitting like right next to him playing.
did you know that,
But Paul McCartney didn't care.
Paul McCartney, I guess, hooked up there, brought her by the studio, was gonna hook up there, something like that, and as like a kind of a joke, passed her along to John Lennon, but he never realized that it would turn into that. It was something like that. He talked about this on the Howard Stern show, kind of passing her off or something like that.
But yeah, like that's a Get Back. That documentary was cool, but I don't know. For me, I grew up listening to the Beatles as well because of my dad.
Yeah,
I need to find that picture of my dad.
him looking like John Lennon.
He looked like one of the Beatles. He had the long shaggy hair, but he had a mustache. I always joke that he looked like Juan McCartney, the Mexican Beatle.
Yeah.
But and so I always one of my favorite classes that I ever took in college was Music 354, History of the Beatles, and it was that class. On the first day that the registration opened up, that class was filled, and it was like in the theater at ASU. It was a theater classroom, and it sat like 500 people, and immediately it would sign up, it would fill up, and so I got to take that class, and the professor Michael Shellins, I think his name is. He would play. He was a musician, and he would tell the stories of the albums, and he would play the songs, and people would get really into it. And so I always kind of like, sort of had an appreciation for the Beatles. I used to like the early stuff, Beatles, the very poppy, lovey, love me do, please please me, whatnot. But then later, as I got to listen to it more, I definitely gravitated more to their later stuff.
Started doing more acid.
Well, you can definitely see the
Disappearing Indie for a while.
The influence
Peppers,
of drugs.
Sergeant
on them.
Peppers came out. Yeah,
starting with like Rubber Soul and like Revolver, Sergeant Peppers. Yeah. Like you can just see in the parent, like they used to tour, and then once they got to like Sergeant Peppers, they said, "We're done. We're done touring. Let's experiment with this music and the sitar and like they went into like." They went to India and they did all these things and experimented with a bunch of drugs, and you can see that and hear that in their music. But definitely Abbey Road is in the mix. Rolling Stone has it in their like top 50, along with the other ones. But you got it on yours. What does Rolling Stone know? You know, what are they, music experts? I don't know.
So they know.
So
what you got? Last one.
So for my last one. This was not harder to pick, but because of the ones I left off, I guess I should say before I share my fourth Mount Rushmore, the ones that I left off, and it's might surprise some people, I did not include any of the Beatles because I couldn't decide from Abbey Road, the White Album, or Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. I couldn't choose
I asked my
one,
son this. He chose the White Album.
The White Album, it's a list of 30 tracks, and more than half of them are amazing.
And you were leaning more towards Sgt. Pepper's, but you did talk about the White Album.
Because of the Sgt. Pepper's was like one of the first concept albums, and so it's a story and it follows. And I love the way it ends because one of my favorite Beatles songs is "A Day in the Life." Mm-hmm. You know, the piano. Dun, dun, dun,
that's right.
Da, da, I heard the news today, oh boy. And so it goes into this story. And that's one of my favorite Beatles songs. But because I couldn't choose between them, I said, you know what? They're just going to be a victim of circumstance. And they're going to kind of knock each other out. I don't know. Kind of like the 92 election? Where Ross Perot kind of threw a wrench in there.
Yeah.
But so they're definitely on my honorable mention. The White Album, Abbey Road, and Sgt. Pepper's. But the last album for me, and this one wasn't hard to choose because, again, I grew up with listening to Spanish rock. It was just a matter of determining which one. And I'm wearing their shirts.
I mean, everybody knows Maná.
Maná. So, Maná, but specifically, Donde Jugarán los Niños. This was the 92 album. And this was the last album where they actually had, like, 5 members, right? And they had a keyboard player on there too, and then one of their guitar players, El Vampiro. He was on this, but then they dropped out of the band. But this album, there's 12 tracks, and I can say that of those 12 tracks, they're all awesome, but I would say 11 of the 12 are like classics, like classics, all of them. Like this whole album, people hear all of them and they're like, "Oh, boom!" They can sing along.
You know what's cool? Something that happened recently, as far as pop culture goes, because Maná was never, I mean, mainstream if you're Latino.
Yeah.
But as far as nationwide, so what happened recently is with the VMAs that Bad Bunny won Artist of the Year.
Yeah.
The pinnacle, and he does nothing in English.
No.
So the fact that a Latino star actually won an album of the, now is he the greatest Latino performer ever? That's besides the point. The point is there's been a lot of crazy influential Latinos that kind of laid the groundwork for this happening.
Yeah.
You go from Maná to people like Selena, stuff like that. Then now you have a fully just all does everything in Spanish.
Yeah.
And the dude wins album of the year. So all the artists that laid the groundwork, and of course Maná, you hear their songs, and they might be one of those bands where you don't think you know who they are, but you hear the song like, oh yeah, I know that song.
The difference with them though is like a lot of artists that sort of span over decade after, like Madonna, the Rolling Stones. Yeah. Like you see, it's almost in order to stay relevant for so long, you have to evolve and kind of not to say that you change genres, but your style kind of morphs as well. And Maná, definitely you can see that, especially with their later stuff. They're now like at the point where they have a residency in LA. They play at the Forum in LA, and they play a couple weekends a month. I think they're playing next weekend for Mexican Independence Day. They're playing that weekend, and then they have another one I think in October. But they're at a point now where no matter where they go, they sell out. And I've seen Maná in concert 7, 8, 9 times. I don't even know how many more times.
My wife's seen them twice, and she says they're just
and they're at a point now where all they're playing are the classics, and so everybody who goes to these concerts, they sing them. Everybody knows them, and the energy, and it's just the man. It's
which is cool because you always hear things from artists like. Because the crowd wants to hear the popular stuff, and the artist's like, I want to play some of my new stuff, right?
Yeah.
And of course, the crowd doesn't know any of the new stuff, but when you're going to give a show, I understand that from artist perspective, but if people are paying to see, give them bang for the buck, so it sounds like Maná does that.
Now they can because they've been around for so long that they don't need to create anything new. Their classics will drive.
I'm going to go see Maná.
You know?
That's it.
Dude, if you've never seen Maná now, and if you're a fan of Spanish rock, you're not going to be disappointed. Yeah. And so for me, this is not even their first album. This is their third album. But there's 12 tracks, and all of them are hits. All of them are classics. And it just kind of, again, reminds me of my upbringing, like my kind of, my influences, my brothers used to listen to Spanish rock a lot. Maná, Enanitos Verdes, Soda Stereo, Los Prisioneros, Café Tacuba, and all of them. So, but Maná is the albums growing, especially again to high school, I listened to them all the time. And this one I would have to say is, for me, this is their best one. So it was not an easy selection process. I was texting, why am I so stressed out over this? But because I was like, I don't know how to go. If you just said Mount Rushmore of classic rock, oh, boom, you have something to guide you. But because we didn't set anything for ourselves, it's just like, I have so many different genres and styles I want to go into that I just was all over.
The big thing I get a kick out of sometimes, just doing anything with you, talking pop culture, is we're only, I think, 4 years apart.
Yeah.
We're 4 years apart in age. But culturally, there's some of the stuff where it's just so ingrained in me, and for you, it's like, or some of the stuff that you're into more modern. I'm like, damn, I didn't really pay attention to that. And so, like right now, Carlos Caro came in the room, and he was talking about his upbringing in the 70s, the music he was into. Then I know my parents, like my mom graduated 76, my dad 72, and some of the genres and male, female, and what they were into, and so even just a few years of difference could really change the neighborhoods you grew up in, the families you grew up in, the family parties you grew up in. Yeah. And so many things could influence what.
That is why.
Put that sticker of nostalgia and everything in.
There's no right or wrong. For this. For this category. I told my students, there's no right or wrong. You just have to justify it. And like you said, your selection, your your Mount Rushmore for albums will be based on what you were influenced by. So this one, I definitely was like, when we talked about topics and what should we do our next one, when we decided let's go with another Mount Rushmore topic, music albums, I was like, yes, I'm ready. But then I was like, damn it, I'm not ready because I can't decide.
Yeah.
But I'd love to hear from others and share. So
Absolutely.
So if you know your four, who's your Mount Rushmore? If you're listening, feel free to drop a comment either on YouTube or Spotify. I know we can do that on Spotify too. Who's on your Mount Rushmore? Feel free to share. We'd love to hear from you. And maybe we
Greatest albums ever.
Who's on your Mount Rushmore
For you?
for albums for you?
Yeah.
And we're not going to give you criteria, but
You
who
can
would
have
put on?
have your own criteria.
You decide.
And that's
And
important.
I'd love to see some different
Yeah.
ideas out there. So
So we're cranking an hour and 5 minutes right now. We want to go to.
So yeah, that was a stressful but fun process. I enjoyed that. So what's
of
been
the
the best thing you've seen all week?
Best thing all week. Look at the tropical storm is a close second, not a close second, but the best thing of me for the week is the Queen is dead. And why is this so significant for me? Because
What, the memes?
the memes have been off the chain. But just
Memes.
who cares who she is? We fought a revolution to get rid of, so we don't have to worry about them. The greatest accomplishment in life for royalty is being born. It's being born. That's it. You are more accomplished than royalty, right? She wasn't a part of the decision making of freaking anything. World War II. No, she was just kind of there. She's a figure. She's like the head of state in Canada, Australia, Britain.
It's kind of
But
like more like a moral.
Yeah,
Leader.
it's like I could get your picture and put it on the wall.
Symbolic.
Yeah, it's like after Mao died,
tradition.
he doesn't really exist, but we're all about Mao, like in China, or something like
Yeah.
that. Like the Queen, she doesn't matter, and a lot of Brits don't feel that way. And of course, I'm a big Smiths fan, Morrissey. He was never big on her, and so I know I'm not alone. You know, being Mexican, being from Southern California, hating on the Queen. No, if you go to England, you're going to find plenty of that.
So we're not trying to offend our 1% listeners.
I am. Give a
I'm
shit.
not. But
Screw the Queen.
So I left off the Beatles. My bad. But hey, some people love the Queen for different reasons.
Prince Charles is a joke.
You know, it's just like some people love following the Kardashians. You know, whatever floats your boat. But yeah, the memes are gold.
Are they talented? Depends.
We
who
need
you
to do a
ask, right?
meme.
If you ask Reggie how talented they are,
Hey,
then yeah.
we need to do a meme episode. We'll
Okay.
work on that. We'll work on that. So
Well, best week for you. Go for it.
best thing I've seen all week is, and kind of to stay on the topic of music.
Uh-huh.
I just recently we went on a camping trip with my family. Most of my family went on this camping trip in Payson area in Arizona, and at the very end on the way back, I got to hear. It is now my favorite rendition of Alicia Keys, and I'll let my niece do the speaking here. But my niece, my brother Edgar's daughter, Micaela, sings "This Girl Is on Fire," and I have to play it for you guys. Enjoy. What time it is? There we go. Micaela, there she is. Tell her, Mika, tell her.
On fire. Even the passion in her voice. Yeah.
She's got range. So that's her rendition of "This Girl's on Fire." That was the best thing I've seen all week.
All right, man. That
Boom.
did it.
Mount Rushmore, best albums. What are your top albums? Let us know. Look forward to hearing it from you. So
Yeah.
till next time.
Yeah. Happy hurricane.